let me do another little update. I'll try to get to the issues real quick. The main thing was the government did the shutdown. For those that don't like politics and all, that's fine. It's the rank hypocrisy of a lot of things that I see. That I see as a society, people who claim Mr. Schumer, Chuck Schumer, the leading Democrat, who basically was having like almost a one-on-one meeting with President Trump the last day, like before the shutdown would take place. This is how you know what I was telling you is true. And what I've been trying to tell the DACA kids, about 800,000 kids that came to the United States when they were young, children, and their parents brought them in, granted illegally. So this is the issue that people are talking about. And what I've tried to make clear, and even the former person that helped President Obama write DACA, even he kind of agreed with me in an article in the Caller Times. And what I was trying to tell people, that DACA was like a temporary thing that a president could do through like an executive action or a policy. And when Mr. Obama did do that in his term, even legal scholars said it could have been challenged when Mr. Obama was still in office. They could have challenged it, and Congress could have, taken him to court on it because he overstepped his boundaries. Because by that particular order he did, it went too far, and it like made law. And presidents are not allowed to make law. They can do certain things through executive action. So anybody that really knows would have told you, well, he kind of did that. And then maybe in a way he felt, let them sue, let Congress take me to court or whatever, which they never did. All right, so that's like a real flimsy thing for you young kids who are now older, between 18 and 28, I think is the average age of the kids, but some are live their lives here. So some are trying to convince you that's it. That's it. And how do I know it's a bunch of hypocrisy? Because when Chuck Schumer, I read the news. I read both sides. Both sides will be blaming each other. But when Schumer went to the president the last day and said, we're going to shut the government down, basically, unless you agree to a certain thing, what you would bring to the president would be a proposal, meaning a bill, saying, we want these kids here legally, and we're wanting to work with you on your security and border wall and everything else, because what we want is a law. We want these kids to have real protection, not something so shaky as the DACA. Mr. Schumer didn't present that to Trump. He presented no forward way that the Democrats and the Republicans could agree on true legal status. He did not bring that to the table. What he brought to the table was DACA. He basically said, if you don't approve of this shaky thing, which has now become in the minds of many Democrats the rallying cry. And that's what I told you in the beginning. That's what shows me. I watched videos this last few weeks, news clips, and I saw statements, and some were from Chuck Schumer. And if you looked at those statements of him, things like, and those of you, this was back in the day when it was popular for many of these Democrats to be very anti-immigrant. And if you looked at those statements that Schumer made on the floor or various things, I saw the videos, but there was a collage of them from Bernie Sanders and others. But the statements were this. And those of you that think that these immigrants who have come in illegally, that we should treat them like, well, they're just filling in for jobs that Americans won't take. And their statements were, don't ever forget they're lawbreakers. Don't ever forget they're not citizens. All the statements that you would hear the extreme right or those on the right make. And they all came from his mouth. And for those that don't follow a lot of politics, a lot of news, there's situations in Israel and in the Middle East, and most of you know Chuck Schumer is a Jewish man. And there's also a strong lobby that people lobby for pro-Israel causes, pro-Palestinian causes, which are a long-term problem in that part of the world, which is a definite problem, okay? The Middle East problem. Some used to say that's the big thing that has to be solved, and things were done recently. But you know, there's a particular pro-Palestinian group, meaning they're not for the radical Hamas terrorist type groups. They're just saying we want people to look at the plight of some of the quote people that are immigrants that are having difficulty living in that part of the world for a long time. And so this group began like a boycott. We're going to just boycott certain, it's pro-Palestinian, and Chuck Schumer himself rose up against them because of the Jewish lobby, if you will. But he's a Jewish man. And so as a Jewish man, Mr. Schumer said, no, I'm going to stick with my Jewish heritage, and I'm going to fight against those Palestinian people who their plight is just as bad as many of the others. So that shows me the hypocrisy. And it's popular for him in that part of the country, New York City. It's popular for him to be anti-Palestinian and anti-Arab and pro-Jewish. And can you imagine if a white man said, I'm going to stick with the white cause because I'm white, and I'm going to make efforts to fight against the Palestinians, and some who are Christians, by the way. So I don't, and when he went to the table on the final thing before the quote shutdown, then I saw various Democrats saying, we did this, and then they went through the actual plight of the DACA kids, the dreamers, and every argument, of course, is true. But what they don't tell the poor kids is they're not wanting you to have true legal status. Because now this coupon status that you got, which is so shaky, they want to keep pushing that. They do not want to have a Republican president be the one who gives true legal protection to these DACA kids. And they would like to just push it, and that showed me. It just showed me the rank hypocrisy of it. That's why I go off on some of these media watching it. I added 3 links. It'll be a post that goes up tomorrow. All these little videos get linked to that post. Still messing with the phone today. I had some of the stuff I had to mess with. But the 3 links I found from the Kohler Times, I was going to share them on Facebook and all, but I was unable to share them. But it showed 3 articles from our local paper. One was so anti-possibility that there's actual fraud in elections, and they came at it with a way like anybody who would tell you there's fraud are prejudiced or racists, because some on the liberal side of the aisle say anyone that wants to make sure that illegal or undocumented people are not voting, if you're saying we think that there's certain fraud in elections, the normal liberal democratic view is you're a racist because you're trying to stop and trying to prevent minorities from voting. If you look into it, they say you're a racist. That's part of it. And then the other article was the same thing in the Kohler Times, and it said, and those who promote this fraudulent idea that fraud exists in voting in the U.S., and the same mindset. And then the last article, the one I spoke on, talked about rampant, huge voter fraud in our county. It exists. People have been. So what does that say? It says they're unable to even see. It says to me that some of these people are pretending to the younger kids, don't you know, we want to convince you younger kids, join up with us in this fight for the DACA. Well, the truth would be, man, we can really help you guys. We really are concerned. We understand there are some in this country that are not, meaning they are very strong in immigration and they don't want to give what they refer to as amnesty. And if you really advocated for these kids, you wouldn't be pushing, and Mr. Schumer would not have gone in with a demand. We've had a few government shutdowns in the history of the country over various reasons. And I do understand there's always hypocrisy on both sides. But never has there been a shutdown to demand the continuation of a policy that a previous president made, at whether executive order, never, because even the courts, to say we shut it down because we want a DACA to continue, something that will be overturned because a court in California said we're going to put it on hold, it's going to go to Supreme Court, it's going to be overturned. No, none in the history of the country. So why did he do it? Why didn't Mr. Schumer and the Democrats have something substantive? Because they don't want it. Some of them don't want it. They lie to you. You're pawns to them. You know, I was thinking, what if you go into any hospital in any part of the country and you go to the nursery, and I used to actually talked earlier about EMT times, but when we had to do the re-upping for the emergency medical stuff, you had to actually do time working in like the hospitals, and sometimes it would be a nursery. You worked in nursery. You know, that was in the early years, just to get hours and continuing education, all this. And if you look at a newborn child anywhere in the country, you would say that's a child. And of course, it is legal in this country up to the 9th month. Meaning if you took that child that you're looking at, and then you saw that baby dismembered and killed, it's a 3rd trimester abortion, you would say, oh, that's a baby that's been brutalized or whatever. And these same types of people will tell you that's not a human being. If you looked at, I've seen many pictures of that over the years. And that's what initially made me very anti-abortion, particularly late term. Because if you can't look at that child in a nursery in a hospital, and the same development in some of the late term abortions is the same exact baby, but the arms cut off, legs cut off. And you would think certainly a society can agree that something like that would be bad. And some of these same people who claim to be moral voices, if you even said to them and showed them a child aborted right before he was born, and if you showed it to them, they would say that's not a human, and how dare you even try to show that to the public. These same voices. So I heard the argument. It would have been possibly worth, quote, shutting down the government if you actually brought something to Mr. Trump, Democrats, that said, we want to work, here's what we're willing to do, and we can make it legal. They didn't want it. They went in DACA, extend DACA. So it's a manipulation. And I just explained to you about Mr. Schumer. And he's fighting against a group that is trying to help some Palestinian people that are trying to also bring peace to a certain region of the country. And Schumer is against those people. And he's openly, as a Jewish man, saying, I side with Jewish people against an Arab people or a Palestinian people or even a Christian Palestinian population. Would anybody on the other side of the aisle be able to say, I'm siding with my race? if it was particularly not a minority race. And when I seen these people crying this last year over the same types of things that were permitted when a Democrat was in office, and I heard the statements from these people, statements saying the immigrants are stealing our jobs. These were Sanders, Schumer, the Clintons. The immigrants are, they do not deserve to be treated like citizens, and these are the Democrats. And don't forget, they're lawbreakers just by being all these statements from like 15 years back. But then the tide turned for political reasons. So true advocates for the kids would have at least tried to explain some of this to you good young kids who I back you up. But don't make no mistake about it. The political leadership that claims that they're for your benefit, they're not. I just showed you that. They're not. They're not. How could you truly advocate for the immigrant when you openly say, oppress the Palestinian immigrant? Mr. Schumer, how could you even have the gall to say, because I'm of Jewish heritage, therefore let's oppress the Arab? Let's oppress the Palestinian, some who are Christians. You know, in the scripture, and I love my Jewish friends, I love all my friends, but make no mistake about it, Mr. Schumer is in the category of those who deny that Jesus is the Christ, theologically. He's a man who claims to stand the leadership of the morality, a denier, and for my strong theological friends, the Antichrist. Whoever denies that Jesus come in the flesh. This is the spirit of Antichrist. And I am not particularly saying a theological thing, but I'm saying I don't think you have the capability in you, sir, to do what is just. I just showed something that is open news, meaning if anybody wanted to research, I wouldn't ask for any party to defend me when your top spokesman openly advocates prejudice against Palestinian people, which he certainly does. And why does he do that, John? There's a strong group. There's a strong Jewish lobby group. I'm not saying I'm against them. And many of the Jewish people living in the New York City area, and many of them would side with me in the sense that there is a plight of Palestinian people that it's not been good. Many would tell you what I just told you. But Mr. Schumer, who collects a lot of political money, he's opposed to groups who want to fight for justice for the Palestinians. He's openly opposed. These people, they're a joke and a sham and a scam. And then I saw, I don't remember her name, she was a lady Democrat. And they said, so why did you not agree? See, you didn't even put anything on the table that would have been for the benefit. You felt like it was good to shut down the government, quote, because you wanted a policy, not to, you wanted a coupon policy. You could have put something substantive on the table and said, no, we want legal status. You didn't do that. It shows, okay, this is a little update. This is the update of the politics in the country. The people that claim to advocate, and if you showed them a 9-month-old beautiful, a 1-day-old beautiful child, just born, but then you showed them the exact same child, I mean same size and everything, but tragically and in some brutally limbs cut. You could find pictures of it, and if you showed it to them and said, look, as a society, can't we see that maybe something is done, and they would hit you. How dare you bring that body into here? Somebody did that on the whole year ago in Congress. Years ago in Congress. You know who did that? I think it was Rick Santorum, a pro-life Republican who's no longer a congressperson. I think he put a picture of a fetus, a baby, and simply asked his colleagues, and it was like a sonogram or something of, said, is this a baby? And the Democrats would say, no. How dare you even show us a picture of a wonderful, beautiful child, whether female or male, 9 months, beautiful. How dare you show that to us? You advocate for the people. Where's your voice for those kids who have no voice? You're so full of it, it's unbelievable. You waste your time with these arguments. I just gave you enough to show you that this man Schumer is probably one of the worst racists you'll ever see because of his attacks against the Palestinian people, which is truly a liberal view, to defend the defenseless, regardless of race, creed, or religion. And the same guy who made statements about these, and I heard them. I heard the videos. He's made them years ago. He said, and those of you who think we are mean, never forget these immigrants are criminals. They've come into the country. These were Democrats saying it, the same ones who were crying this last year. I wonder if they're possessed. They didn't want anything for these kids. They wanted, let's do the DACA. And let's convince these kids that something that's not going to help them. Let's convince them that's best. Let's convince these mothers who, when later they see what happened, the abortion story I shared a week ago, and they didn't tell that poor minority mother that the child was developed. She was not learned. And they convinced her, no, the protrusion in your stomach, that's just a lot of fluids, things of that nature. No, this is not a child at all. And then she asked the nurse, I'd like to see it. I believe the girl was black. And then she told the doctor, this mother, who we convinced didn't dissuade in any way that what she just did was the aborting of a child. We convinced her it was a blob, it was this, it was all the Schumers, all these that can't even say it's a baby. Then they brought it out to the mom. And she screamed, I kill my baby, I kill my baby, I kill my baby. And you couldn't even care less of the trauma on some of the women that are not even informed. So, Mr. Schumer, you convinced a bunch of kids DACA's the way. Are you going to keep persecuting people that are not of your heritage, sir? Are you going to continue to deny that Jesus is the Christ? Which, according to the New Testament, according to John, that's the spirit of Antichrist. And I would just simply say, you believe in the lies that you tell the public. When I just looked at those 3 articles that I talked about in our local Caller Times over the last month or so, they came out, and I'm a reader, and I remember reading them. How dare anybody believe there's voter fraud? Anybody who ever even brings up voter fraud is a racist, trying to oppress the vote. Then the next one, the same thing, the same line. And then the next one, rampant voter fraud, out of control in the city of Rochester. From the woman who's the assessor here, whose sister tragically died in a car crash. I'm thinking, don't you even see? There should be a requirement, and you wonder about Mr. Trump's dementia? The cognitive test. You just took the cognitive test, and you just failed.